Crash Bandicoot. My first PlayStation love. Hey Will, why are you doing a top 10 of a series that ran over a decade ago? Because the new ones aren't getting it right, damn it. But seriously, classic Crash Bandicoot. I miss you so. Now, great level design and platforming mechanics aside, the one thing I actually loved about the Crash series were the characters. Now, of course, there's only so many characters in this universe. We've got Crash, this strong but silent marsupial, and everyone else who's out to kill Crash because he keeps on getting in the way of their evil plots, and they're just not having any of that. But I digress. Point being here, folks, you can have one of the greatest platformers on your hands of all time, ever. But what really holds these classics together are the big bad bosses at the end of each world. The ones who say, I'm going to kill your ass to death and ain't nothing gonna get in my way. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am here to tell you exactly which Crash bosses say that the best. Figuratively speaking. Welcome to TCV's top 10 Crash bosses of the Warp Room era. Number 10. Pinstripe Potteroo. I know this is a weird one to start off with, but as far as boss mechanics in the first Crash game goes, this one's pretty unique. For the first time, you're not running, jumping, or dodging your way to victory, you're straight up hiding. Not to mention the first and probably last time we'll ever see a legit Tommy gun in a kid's game ever again. The name of the game here is Patience. You wait for Pinstripe's gun to jam, or wait, is he just laughing hysterically? I can never tell. And give him the old 1-2. Sources claim that Naughty Dog's website at one point stated that Pinstripe ends up stealing her girlfriend after the events of the first Crash game. Oh, that's nice, after you collect every single gem, beat all of Cortex's goons, climb up a perilous looking tower to fight your arch nemesis on top of a freaking blimp? And your girlfriend goes off with some other guy? Man, I hate it when that happens. Number 9. Rocco. Let me be frank, the first time I faced this boss, I had no idea what was going on. Crash Bandicoot, The Wrath of Cortex introduced the hamster ball gimmick, in which Crash is literally stuck in a hamster ball and is forced to roll around the entirety of the level, Super Monkey Ball style. It's a fresh gimmick and implemented pretty well. And hey, look who's here to provide obstacles! Dingodile, Trophy... oh god, what have they done to you? Tiny? Oh my god, you've literally been reduced to roadblock. You can't even hurt me. This is like lesser than Goomba status. Don't get me wrong, I do appreciate the nods to these characters, even the long since missing Komodo bros who haven't been seen since the Crash Racing games, but anyhow, I digress. Now, for some reason, these rocks are made from magic, and hitting all of them in the arena will cause a shower of rocks to fall all over Crunch, causing him to get super dizzy and lose a bit of his health. If Crunch gets to them first, you're the one who gets hit by magical rocks, and the game goes forward until somebody gets too dizzy to go on. Lather, rinse, repeat, with more rocks thrown into the mix, and voila, the day is yours. The reason I've given Rocco one of the top 10 spots is because at the very least, this is a new gimmick to introduce into a boss fight, and the game definitely gives you all the means to test out this new gimmick before using it against Crunch, so it's a pretty fair and most importantly, fresh mechanic for a Crash boss all in all. Number 8. Engine. First off, can we all appreciate Engine for his character design? This guy's got a rocket sticking out of his head. A live freaking missile. Anytime he begins to lose it, it begins to set off. Talk about anger management. This boss introduces a one-time only mechanic for Crash, throwing Loompa Fruit at the overly obvious hit me lights to destroy each part of Engine's wannabe Gundam wing. Now, either Engine really skimped out on mechanical parts for his machine, or Crash has got one hell of a right arm to have Fruit take down a 200-ton space machine of death. The Engine fight is pretty fun, and possibly one of the most unique Crash bosses ever. I still get the feeling that Naughty Dog didn't have the time to give Crash a throwing animation to make the fight feel a little more complete. I mean, look at this, Fruit's literally coming out of his body. Maybe they wanted to implement the Fruit Bazooka introducing Crash Warped here instead? Who knows? What I do know is that this boss does a great job at breaking up the pace from the rest of the game, and is challenging in his own right. The only remaining question is how did Engine never acquire the nickname Rocket Man after his little incident? Number 7. Dr. Neo Cortex. The infamous jetpack from Crash 2 Cortex Strikes Back. Folks, the true boss isn't Cortex, it's that goddamn jetpack. Its stupidly awkward controls makes this boss fight... Wait, it's not even a fight, it's a chase! Anyway, the goal is to spin into Cortex 3 times. If you don't, he flies through a portal that for some reason causes Crash to give up and call it a day. What is he, unmotivated? Follow him! Anyway, when you combine a jetpack with a boss fight, I'm pretty okay with it as a final battle to a very well developed game. If the fight had a little more oomph to it, like changing up the obstacles throughout the flight, and maybe if the jetpack handled better even, I might have ranked it higher, but short-lived, but a fun face-off with Cortex nonetheless. Number 6, Pyro. Great balls of fire. Literally, this boss seriously turns up the heat. The third boss from Crash Bandicoot to Wrath of Cortex is definitely a welcoming one in a game that falls short of topping its predecessors in my humble opinion. Here, the Bandicoot Crunch, brainwashed by Cortex, makes use of the fire elemental, which turns him into stone? Okay. Anyway, the fight has you running away Boulder Dash style until you come across this handy dandy machine that puts you on the offensive to try and get Crunch wet with your hose. That sounded better in my head. For the record, I love this machine. It feels powerful and handles great. It comes back in a level here and a level there in the game, but I definitely wish we got more use out of it. Now, for some reason, Aku Aku blesses your machine before you can chase after Crunch, which makes me think that this boss fight takes place in the 7th Circle of Hell. Pyro is Satan in masked form, and the only way to defeat him is to playfully shower him in holy water. Or, you know, I could be reading into this a bit too much. Oh, but he's voiced by Mark Hamill. Yeah, that's cool. Number 5, Mecha Bandicoot. Holy look at this thing. The Mecha Bandicoot comes out of freaking nowhere after a pretty easygoing fight with Cortex, and shit does this thing have one goal and only one goal in mind. Kick Crash's ass into obscurity. Where, funnily enough, he pretty much is right now. The Mecha Bandicoot is part 2 of the first boss in Crash Twinsanity, and boy is it a good one. This one's got missiles, laser beams, and even a giant chainsaw to cut your ass in half. Honestly folks, the reason Mecha makes it onto my top 10 list is because this is just such a fun fight, and it feels great to take down the giant metal monstrosity as the orange marsupial. Your arsenal of attacks versus his. Pure, unadulterated fun. Number 4, Entropy. Oh, Tropy, the creator of the time machine that's essentially Crash 3's warp room. Actually, it is Crash 3's warp room. This has got to be the oddest looking time machine I've ever seen, and I'm a Doctor Who fan. But moving on, you know what folks, this boss is actually pretty straightforward. Avoid attacks, then platform your way over to spin his ass, or back to the other platform. But anyone who knows me knows that I am a complete sucker for a good boss tune, and Entropy's takes the cake. Seriously, listen to the pre-console version of this theme, it's freaking incredible! Otherwise, solid boss all in all. Biggest disappointment is that he's teased to be much more of a threat since the opening cutscene of the game, so you'd think he'd have a much bigger role to play by the end of the story, but hey, I gotta say, even during the short dialogue exchanges in the level's Vortex's loading screens, Trophy's a pretty menacing villain in his own right, and I'd love to see him make a major comeback in a future game. You know, if the Crash series ever goes back to its roots. Number 3, Engine. Back for more. Cortex's right-hand man after he and Brio had their little breakup after Crash 1. Can I get a fanfiction on that, please? Naughty Dog never fleshed out all the drama between those two. Anyhow, this boss from Crash 3 is fought in space against a gigantic transformer by Coco and Puma, a freaking tiger who joins her in his own space pod halfway through the fight to lay the smackdown on this beta Megatron. Naughty Dog, I have no idea why this is one of the most ridiculously awesome things I've ever experienced in a video game, but it is, and I thank you. Now, greatiest this is not, but as a short space shooter sequence, it's really fun to play. For some reason, the controller's vibration when you make contact with Engine's robot just makes me relish in satisfaction, and it really makes you feel like you're right there in all the action. I gotta say, Engine's come a long way since Crash 2 and his metallic spaceship that could pump out instant death lasers and yet was beaten by having chunks of fruit chucked into it. But, you know, now that I think of it, maybe all that Wumpa is actually clogging up the machine's gears. Yeah, and it affects the hydraulics, or you know what, maybe it's... actually, it's above my pay grade to think of these sorts of things. Moving on. Number 2, the twins. Ah, the evil twins, Victor and Moritz. Cortex's pets when he was but a wee little evil scientist working on the first ever Evolvo Ray, which, fun fact, is the device that sets up the events of Crash 1. Oh, I love throwbacks. Props to the developers for this cool nod to the original series. Anyhow, the birds somehow turned their cage into a manic killing machine and, true to Final Boss Syndrome, has 3 forms, which you tackle using all 3 playable characters from the game. Nina, using her literal arms of steel to platform. Cortex, firing away, and finally, oh yes, Crash, albeit controlling the Mecha Bandicoot, which literally comes out of nowhere. again.
Oh yeah!
But hey, it's a nice change of pace and fun to control for a short time. Though each part of the fight is epic in its own right, my biggest gripe is that there's no satisfactory finishing blow here. You land the final strike like any other hit and these guys fly away to Kingdom Come? Or well, to not fake Crash's humble abode, but whatever. Pretty fun boss to conclude a pretty fun game. Though Christ, it's a lot more difficult than I remember it being. Look at this file from when I first played it as a kid, 100%. That'll happen to me. Have I gone casual? Number 1. Dr. Neo Cortex. As cliched as it might sound, the final battle with Cortex in what's possibly the best Crash game out there takes the number 1 spot for best Crash boss of all time. This boss has it all, not only the music, precise platforming, but even freaking Aku Aku and Uka Uka duking it out one-on-one on the same arena you and Cortex are butting heads. Most importantly, Cortex finally learns that it's not in his best interest to shoot projectiles that his enemy can use as an active weapon against himself, a la Crash 1. Oh, never mind, he forgets again in Twinsanity. Actually, he outright tells you can hit them back then.
Here's one gift you can return.
In this epic duel of evil scientist versus mindless marsupial, it'll put all your dodging and attacking prowess to the test as you fight Cortex and knock him into Kingdom Come. Or at least this odd yet convenient little vent in the middle of the arena. It's simple, fun, and a very satisfying finale to a great game. That's why Dr. Neo Cortex from Crash Warped wins the number 1 spot on this top 10 boss list. And that's about it, ladies and gentlemen. To be honest, this was a tough list to narrow down. There are so many cool bosses in the Crash franchise, and I wish I could have highlighted them all. I know people probably have their own favorites and won't agree with a lot of the bosses on my list, but you know, it's subjective, folks, and if you have your own favorites that weren't mentioned here, feel free to drop me a message or leave a comment in the comments section. We can talk some Crash, I'm always up for that. But end of the day, these were the bosses that really stuck out in my head ever since I was a kid. These are the bosses that I love going back to and just facing again, even if I'm not playing through the entire game. Just because they're so full of character, it really makes them satisfying when you bring them down. It's refreshing. There's a lot of games out there that I think don't really flesh out their bosses as much as certain games do, and it's amazing a game like Crash that doesn't focus so much of its attention on story has these characters that are just so full of life and so unique and just so much fun while at the same time being actually villainous. I always appreciate that in video games. It makes the boss fights feel so much more full and way more satisfying when you finally bring them down, which is what I think a good boss should serve in a video game. Anyhow, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me for another top 10 list. I hope you're enjoying these. There are more to come, and I can't wait to share more of them with you. If there's any games that you have in mind that you might want me to take a look at, feel free to send me a message or leave a comment, and yeah, I'll do my best to take a look. Anyhow, until the next game, arigato!